I first noticed the change on a Tuesday morning in October. The air had that crisp autumn bite, leaves skittering across the sidewalk as I walked to my usual coffee shop. Nothing seemed unusual until the barista Kevin, who had made my vanilla latte with an extra shot for the past 3 years, looked up from the espresso machine and met my eyes. Something shifted in his face. It was subtle at first, like watching ice form on water. His friendly smile tightened, then twisted into something else entirely. His pupils dilated until his eyes were nearly black, and a tremor passed through his hands. "Are you okay?" I asked, concerned that he was having some kind of medical episode. Kevin's lips peeled back from his teeth in what might have been a smile, but looked more like an animal snarl. "What can I get for you today?" he asked, his voice pitched lower than normal, a strange rasp underlying each word. "The usual?" I tried to keep my tone light. Maybe he was just having a bad day. "I could give you something special," he replied, leaning over the counter. His fingernails, bitten to the quick last week, now looked longer, pressing into the wooden countertop hard enough to leave marks. Something no one else gets. The hair on my arm stood on end. This wasn't Kevin, not really. There was something fundamentally wrong about him, as if someone had hollowed out the friendly barista I knew and poured something else inside. "Just a small coffee, black," I said, stepping back. "To go." His movements were jerky as he filled a paper cup, spilling coffee over the sides. When he handed it to me, his fingers brushed mine deliberately, lingering too long. His skin felt fever hot. "Come back soon, Mara," he whispered, though I had never told him my name. "I'll be waiting." I left without my change, the bell above the door jangling discordantly as I escaped into the morning light. Outside, I dumped the untouched coffee into a trash can, my hands shaking. It wasn't until I was halfway down the block that I realized the cup had something written on it. Not my name or order, but a crude, explicit drawing that made my stomach turn. I told myself it was an isolated incident. Kevin must have been on something or having a psychotic break. It wasn't personal. But then it happened again. The elderly doorman of my apartment building, who had never been anything but grandfatherly, made a lewd comment as I passed. The delivery guy from the Thai restaurant leaned too close, inhaling deeply near my neck. My gynecologist's hands lingered inappropriately during an exam. Each incident built upon the last, transforming the landscape of my daily life into a minefield. And each time I saw that same transformation, pupils dilating, muscles tensing, something primal and vicious overtaking their features. Work became unbearable. I'm a research librarian at the university, and suddenly male faculty members who had treated me with professional courtesy for years were following me into the stacks, cornering me in the rare manuscripts room, sending emails filled with increasingly disturbing requests that had nothing to do with academic research. I began to feel like prey, constantly scanning my environment, looking for the quickest exit, cataloging potential weapons. I stopped going to my favorite cafe, started buying groceries online, took a leave of absence from work. I became a ghost in my own life, trying desperately to minimize my contact with half the human population. Then came the night that drove me into complete isolation. I had risked a quick trip to the pharmacy for migraine medication. The store was nearly empty, just me, the pharmacist, and a security guard by the door. I grabbed what I needed and approached the counter, already sensing the familiar dread building in my stomach as the young pharmacist looked up. It happened instantly this time. No gradual transformation. One moment, he was a bored 20-something in a white coat. The next, something else entirely peered out from behind his eyes. "You'll need to sign for this," he said, sliding a form across the counter, his voice thick with an emotion I didn't want to identify. I scribbled my signature, avoiding his gaze. "You know," he said, leaning forward until I could smell his breath, sour milk and something metallic. "There are side effects to this medication: dizziness, confusion, disorientation. You shouldn't be alone tonight." "I'll be fine," I muttered, reaching for my prescription. His hand shot out, gripping my wrist with crushing force. "I get off in 20 minutes. I could come check on you." "Let go of me," I said, my voice steadier than I felt. His smile widened, revealing teeth that seemed too sharp, too numerous. "Make me." The security guard approached then, and for one foolish moment, I felt relief. Until I saw his face, the same transformation, the same hungry look. "Everything okay here?" he asked, but he was looking at me, not the pharmacist, and his hand was resting on something at his belt that wasn't his flashlight or radio. I wrenched my arm free and ran, abandoning my medication, my purse, everything but my desperate need to escape. Behind me, I heard laughter, not the normal laughter of men enjoying a joke, but something wilder, more feral, the sound of predators beginning a hunt. I barricaded myself in my apartment that night, pushing a dresser against the door, checking and rechecking the locks on the windows. My phone wouldn't stop buzzing with texts from numbers I didn't recognize, each message more graphic and threatening than the last. How had they gotten my number? I finally turned it off, my hand shaking so badly I had to try 3 times to hit the power button. In the silence that followed, I tried to make sense of what was happening. Was I losing my mind? Having some sort of extended paranoid delusion? Or was something genuinely wrong with every man I encountered? The internet offered no answers, just conflicting theories about pheromones, mass hysteria, and rare psychological conditions. Nothing that explained the physical transformation I witnessed each time, that predatory shift that came over otherwise normal men. Sleep was impossible. I sat on my bathroom floor all night, a kitchen knife in one hand, jumping at every creak and groan of the old building. By morning, I had made a decision. I needed to understand what was happening and I couldn't do that while running scared. I called my older sister Diane, the only person I still trusted completely. She lived just outside the city on a few acres of land, isolated, defensible. She agreed to let me stay without asking too many questions. That was Diane, practical to a fault, accepting the bizarre with stoic calm. Getting to her would be the challenge. I couldn't risk public transportation or a taxi. Finally, I called Rachel, a graduate student from the library who had always been kind to me. She agreed to drive me, her voice warm with concern, when I explained I was having some issues with men. The journey to Diane's was tense, but uneventful. Rachel chattered about her dissertation, filling the silence while I stared out the window, flinching whenever we passed a male pedestrian or another car with a man behind the wheel. None of them could see me through the tinted windows of Rachel's ancient Volvo, but my body hummed with the certainty of danger nonetheless. Diane was waiting on her porch when we arrived, tall and solid in her gardening clothes, so normal that I nearly wept with relief. She hugged me tightly, then stepped back to study my face. "You look like hell," she said flatly. "Come inside. I've got tea." I thanked Rachel profusely, watching until her car disappeared down the long gravel driveway before following Diane into the house. The familiar scent of herbs and wood smoke enveloped me, momentarily pushing back the fear that had become my constant companion. "Start from the beginning," Diane said, once we were settled at her kitchen table, mugs of chamomile tea steaming between us. So I did. I told her everything, expecting skepticism or concern for my mental health. Instead, she listened with a stillness that was almost unnerving, her eyes never leaving my face. When I finished, she was quiet for a long moment. Then she said, "You're not the first, you know." A chill ran through me. "What do you mean?" "It's happened before, to women in our family." She stood abruptly, disappearing into another room before returning with a leather-bound journal, its pages yellow with age. "This was our great-grandmother's. Read it." I opened the journal with trembling hands. The handwriting was spidery, but legible. The ink faded to a rusty brown. As I read, my breath caught in my throat. Great-grandmother Eliza described exactly what I had been experiencing, men transforming in her presence, becoming predatory, violent. She called it the seeing, as if she could suddenly see what had always been there, lurking beneath the surface of male civility. "There are others," Diane said quietly. "Journals going back generations. Always women in our family, always starting around their 32nd birthday." I had turned 32 3 weeks ago. "Why didn't you warn me?" I demanded, anger flaring through my fear. "It doesn't happen to everyone," she replied, looking away. "I never experienced it. Mom didn't either. We thought maybe it had died out, like Great Aunt Martha's color blindness or Cousin Ellie's extra toes." "What happened to them?" I asked, my mouth dry. "The ones who had the seeing." Diane's silence was answer enough. The next few days passed in a fog of research and mounting dread. We pored over family journals, pieced together genealogies, searched for patterns. What we found was horrifying. Every woman in our family who developed the seeing died violently within a year. Police reports called them random attacks, tragic encounters with deranged strangers. The family knew better. There has to be a way to stop it, I insisted, pacing Diane's living room on the 5th day of my stay. Some way to turn it off. The journals don't mention any cure, Diane said gently. But maybe we're looking at this wrong. Maybe it's not something to cure. Maybe it's a warning. A warning of what? That men are dangerous? I think I've got that message loud and clear. Not all men, all the time, Diane clarified. But certain men, under certain circumstances. What if this is some kind of evolutionary adaptation? A survival mechanism? Some survival mechanism, I scoffed. It's going to get me killed. Not if we use it, she countered. You can see them for what they really are. That's power, Mara. I stared at her, wondering if isolation had made me so desperate that her words actually made a twisted kind of sense. Our conversation was interrupted by the crunch of tires on gravel. Diane frowned, peering out the window. Were you expecting someone? I asked, panic clawing at my throat. No. Stay here. She moved toward the front door, her posture tense. I couldn't see the visitor from my position, but I heard a male voice, low, pleasant, asking something about directions. Diane's responses were clipped, unhelpful. She was trying to get rid of him. Then I heard her sharp intake of breath, followed by a thud. I was moving before conscious thought, grabbing a heavy cast iron pan from the kitchen as I ran to the front door. The scene that greeted me was straight from my nightmares. Diane sprawled on the porch, blood trickling from her temple, and a man standing over her, ordinary looking in his postal uniform, except for his eyes, which were fixed on me with that now familiar hunger. There you are, he said, his voice almost gentle. Been looking all over for you, Mara. How did he know my name? Had he followed me here? Had someone sent him? Get away from her, I warned, raising the pan. He smiled, revealing teeth that seemed to sharpen as I watched. They said you'd be difficult. That's okay. I like difficult. He stepped over Diane's unconscious form, moving toward me with predatory grace. I backed into the house, mind racing. I needed a plan, a weapon, something more substantial than a cooking implement. Who sent you? I demanded, playing for time. No one sent me. I found you all on my own. His voice dropped to a conspiratorial whisper. I can smell you, you know. Your fear. Your knowing. He tapped his temple. Special. That's what you are. A woman who sees. Can't have that. He lunged suddenly, faster than I anticipated. The pan connected with his shoulder instead of his head, and he barely flinched. His hand closed around my throat, pushing me against the wall. His face was inches from mine, his breath hot on my skin. "Why are you doing this?" I gasped. "Because you can see," he hissed, his face contorting into something barely human. "And women who see don't get to live." In that moment of absolute terror, something shifted inside me, not resignation, but clarity. Diane was right. This was power. If only I could understand how to use it. I stopped struggling against his grip, instead meeting his gaze directly. Something flickered in those inhuman eyes, surprise, then uncertainty. "Yes, I can see you," I said, my voice raspy but steady. "All of you. What you are beneath your skin." His grip loosened fractionally. "What am I then?" he asked, almost childlike in his curiosity. "Fear," I whispered. "Your fear of women who know too much, who see too clearly. You're the thing that's always hunted us throughout history, the force that burns witches and stones prophets and silences truth-tellers." He flinched as if struck. "Shut up." "You're afraid of me," I continued, a wild certainty building in my chest. "That's why you hunt women like me, because we can name you." "I said shut up," he roared, slamming me against the wall again. But there was panic in his eyes now. I kept talking, the words pouring out as if from some ancestral memory. "I see you. I name you. I reject the power you think you have over me." His skin seemed to ripple, features blurring like wax held too close to flame. He released me suddenly, staggering backward. "What are you doing?" he gasped. I advanced on him now, something ancient and terrible rising within me. What my great-grandmother should have done, what all the women in my family should have known to do. Outside, I heard Diane stirring on the porch, groaning softly. She was alive. Relief flooded through me, strengthening my resolve. "They can't see you," I continued, backing him toward the door. "But I can, and I am not afraid." The last part was a lie. I was terrified. But something told me that fear acknowledged was different from fear that controlled. I could be afraid and still fight. He seemed smaller now, diminished somehow. His postal uniform hung loosely, as if he were shrinking inside it. "You can't stop us all," he hissed, but his voice lacked conviction. "There will always be more." "Then I'll see them too," I replied. "All of them. And I'll teach others to see." I don't know what would have happened next if Diane hadn't appeared in the doorway behind him, a shotgun raised to her shoulder. She didn't hesitate. The blast caught him squarely in the back, throwing him forward at my feet. What lay there wasn't a man, not anymore. It was something else, something I could barely comprehend, a writhing mass of shadow and teeth and ancient malice. It convulsed once, twice, then dissolved into oily smoke that dissipated in the afternoon light. Diane lowered the shotgun, blood still trickling down her face. "You saw it too?" she asked quietly. I nodded, unable to speak. Then it started for me as well, she said, more to herself than to me. The seeing. We burned the journals that night, not to destroy the knowledge, but to release it, sending the experiences and warnings of our ancestors into the universe as smoke and ash. The answer had been there all along, hidden in plain sight. The women who died weren't killed because they could see. They were killed because they didn't understand what to do with that sight. Fear named is fear diminished. What hunts us loses power when we recognize it, when we stand our ground and refuse to be prey. There are still days when I wake drenched in sweat from nightmares of being pursued. There are still men whose transformations are so swift and violent that all I can do is flee. The world is no safer than it was before.